Liverpool were frustrated at Anfield, Manchester United went blunt at Sunderland, Brighton and Bournemouth kept their European dreams alive, Wolves looked completely broken, and Manchester City did exactly what title-chasing teams have to do. They found a way, turned the screw and kept the pressure on Arsenal. This was not just another Premier League Saturday, this was the running starting to expose who has momentum, who has problems, and who might be running out of time. Welcome back to Fullscope Football, where we see the whole game, and today we're going match by match through the Premier League action, breaking down what happened, why it matters and what it means for the title race, the Champions League places, the European chase and the clubs who look like they're limping towards the summer. So let's start off at Anfield, where Liverpool and Chelsea played out a 1-1 draw. Liverpool started quickly and got themselves ahead through Ryan Gravenberch, and at that point it felt like this could become a very difficult afternoon for Chelsea. Anfield was up, Liverpool had the early goal, Chelsea had arrived in poor Premier League form, everything seemed set up for Liverpool to take control, but they didn't. Instead, Chelsea grew into the match. Liverpool lost some of that early authority, and Enzo Fernández's free kick brought Chelsea level, with Wesley Fofana also involved in the final touch. For Chelsea, this was a useful point. It doesn't suddenly fix their season, and it doesn't erase their problems, but after a bad league run, going to Anfield and coming away with something at least gives them a platform. Sometimes when confidence is low, the first step is not a brilliant performance, it's simply stopping the damage. And Chelsea, they did just that. But the biggest story here might actually be Liverpool, because Liverpool is still in a strong position in the table. They're still in the Champions League places, and they're still in control of their own situation. But the mood around Anfield didn't feel comfortable. There was frustration in the ground, especially around the substitution of Rio and Gamoa. Arne Slot later explained that the young winger had cramp and couldn't continue at full intensity, but the reaction from the supporters showed there's tension there. And that's where this gets interesting, because on paper Liverpool aren't a club in crisis. But football is not only played on paper. At a club like Liverpool, the feeling matters, the rhythm matters, and the connection between the team and the crowd matters. And this one felt like one of those afternoons where the result wasn't terrible, but the atmosphere around it told a bigger story. Liverpool will look at this as 2 points dropped, Chelsea will look at it as a point gained, but for Arne Slot, this is another reminder that being fourth is not enough to quiet every question. Not when the performances still feel uncertain, not when the crowd's getting restless, and not when the run-in is getting tighter. The pressure level for Liverpool is 7 out of 10. It's not a crisis, but definitely not calm. Next up, Sunderland against Manchester United at the Stadium of Light. And this was one of those goalless draws that says different things depending on which side you support. For Sunderland, this was disciplined, organised and respectable. They frustrated United, they kept their shape, they gave very little away, and against a side pushing near the top end of the table, that is just a result they can take pride in. But for Manchester United, this was flat. United is still in a strong league position and they're still close to securing what they need, but the performance was not convincing, and that matters, because there's a difference between being a team that finishes in the Champions League places and being a team that looks ready to challenge for the biggest prizes. United looked secure, but they didn't look ruthless. They lacked a cutting edge, they lacked tempo in key moments, and too often it felt like they were waiting for the game to open up rather than forcing it open themselves. Sonny Lamans was important for United, helping them come away with a clean sheet and a point. But that also tells you something. When one of your biggest positives in a 0-0 draw is your goalkeeper, there's probably a wider conversation to be had about what happened in front of him. And now it's not a disaster. A point away from home at this stage of the season is not worthless. United are still in a good position, but they'll not look back at this as a season-ending result. But supporters are allowed to ask for more, because if Manchester United wanted to be judged like an elite side again, performances like this can't just be brushed away. The question is not simply, did United get a point? The question is, did United look like a side building towards something bigger? And on this evidence, Not really. They looked controlled, they looked safe, but they didn't look dangerous enough. Now let me know in the comments on this one, would you take the point and move on, or was that just another warning sign about where United still need to improve? I would put the concern level for Manchester United at 6 out of 10. It's not a panic, but it's definitely not convincing either. Now to Brighton, and this was probably the cleanest, most professional win of the day. Brighton beat Wolves 3-0, and they basically ended the contest inside the opening 5 minutes. Jack Hinchelwood scored early, Lewis Dunk added another almost immediately, and from that point Wolves were chasing a game that had already got away from them. Nkuba Minter added a third late on, but the damage was done right at the start, and for Brighton this was exactly what they needed. At this stage of the season, when you're chasing Europe, you don't need chaos and you don't need drama. You don't need a nervous afternoon where the crowd starts checking other scores every 5 minutes. You need to win the games you should win, and Brighton did that. They were sharp, aggressive, they punished Wolves immediately, and once they were in control, they never really allowed the match to become uncomfortable. This is why Brighton remains such an impressive club. Players change, managers change, even expectations change. But the structure keeps giving them a platform. They keep finding players, they keep building teams, and they keep staying relevant in conversations that, financially, they're not supposed to dominate. And now they still are right in the European mix. For Wolves though, this was grim. Because yes, relegation is already damaging enough, but there are different ways to go down. You can go down fighting, you can go down unlucky. You can go down because the margins just went against you. But performances like this feel different. Conceding twice in the opening 5 minutes tells you a lot about focus, confidence and belief. Wolves look like a team already carrying the weight of what's happened to them this season, and that's dangerous. Because the Championship's not easy. It doesn't care about Premier League status, big names, or recent history. If Wolves take on this level of confidence into the next season, the rebuild becomes even harder. Brighton are alive, Wolves look broken. So we'll give Brighton's European push 8 out of 10, and the damage level for Wolves 9 out of 10. Next we head to Craven Cottage, where Bournemouth picked up a massive away win, beating Fulham 1-0. And this was not a pretty calm, straightforward match. It had red cards, it had tension, it had awkward moments, it had the kind of edge you'd expect when two clubs are fighting to make the most of their season. Ryan Christie was sent off for Bournemouth, and Joachim Andersen was then sent off for Fulham. And once both sides were down to 10 men, the game became stretched, unpredictable and scrappy. But Bournemouth found the decisive moment. Ryan scored early in the second half, and that was enough to win it. And honestly, that's where Bournemouth deserve a lot of credit, because these are the results that change the season. Not the glamorous wins, not the games where everything flows perfectly, and not the afternoons where you score 4 and everyone talks about the football. Sometimes the really important wins are the ugly ones, away from home, under pressure, with the match turning chaotic. And Bournemouth handled it, and that says something about the mentality of this side. They're not just having a nice season anymore, they're in the European conversation, properly in it, and that's huge. Because Bournemouth are not one of the clubs people automatically expect to see in this race. They're not supposed to be sitting there alongside bigger names with bigger budgets and bigger reputations. But the table doesn't care about reputation, it cares about points, and Bournemouth keep picking them up. For Fulham, this feels like a missed opportunity. Their season is still being respectable, but this result adds to the sense that they're just drifting slightly. Good enough to avoid serious trouble, good enough to compete, but maybe lacking that final push to turn a solid campaign into something more exciting. Bournemouth, meanwhile, are still dreaming, and if they do end up in Europe, this is the sort of result they'll look back on and say, well, that mattered. It wasn't perfect or pretty, but absolutely massive. And so for Bournemouth Europeans dream, we'll give them 8 out of 10. But Fulham drift level, well, that's a 6 out of 10. And finally, Manchester City against Brentford. This was the late game, the pressure game, and this was the match City simply had to win, and they did. Manchester City beat Brentford 3-0 at the Etihad, with all 3 goals coming in the second half. Jérémy Doku opened the scoring on the hour mark, Erling Haaland added the second with 15 minutes to go, and Omar Marmoush sealed it in stoppage time. On the surface, 3-0 looked comfortable, but this was not a City side strolling through the whole match. The first half was frustrating. Brentford held firm and City had to be patient, and when you're chasing a title, that's when tension starts to build, because every minute without a goal feels bigger, every blocked shot feels more important, every Brentford counter-attack carries that bit of extra danger. And this is where City deserve credit. They didn't panic and they just kept pushing, and eventually Doku gave them the breakthrough they needed. That goal changed the entire feel of the match. Once City got ahead, Brentford had to open up more. The spaces obviously started to appear, and then the pressure shifted and City did what City do so often at this stage of the season. They turned control into punishment. Haaland's goal made it 2-0 and gave City breathing room. Marmoush's late goal made the scoreline look emphatic. And just like that, the pressure goes straight back onto Arsenal. City are now within 2 points of the league leaders, with 3 games left for both clubs. That is the title race, and that is the story. Arsenal is still ahead, Arsenal still have the advantage, but Manchester City is still there, still chasing and still waiting for one mistake. And that's what makes City so dangerous. They don't always need to be perfect for 90 minutes, they just need one spell and one breakthrough. One moment where the opposition finally cracks. Brentford made them work this afternoon, but City finally answered. And at this stage of the season, that's all that matters. This was not just a win, this was a message to Arsenal. You may be top, but we're not gone. So we give City's title pressure response a 9 out of 10 and the Brentford frustration level 7 out of 10. So what does that actually mean today? Liverpool is still in the Champions League places, but the mood around Anfield is not completely settled. That draw against Chelsea is not a disaster, but it does feed into the feeling that Liverpool is still not fully convincing at the exact moment they need control, and Chelsea will take that point. After the run they've been on, a draw at Anfield gives them something to build from, even if it doesn't suddenly change the bigger picture. And Manchester United are still in the strong position, but the Sunderland draw was another reminder that they're not yet the ruthless team they were. They may be heading where they want to go in the table, but performances like that still leave supporters asking whether this team is really ready to take the next step. Now Brighton were one of the clear winners of the day. They did the job, took care of Wolves quickly and kept themselves right in the European conversation. Bournemouth were another big winner. That away win at Fulham could be huge. They're not just hanging around anymore, they are genuinely pushing, and Fulham feel like they're drifting. Wolves look like a club in serious need of a reset, and Manchester City kept the title race alive. That's the biggest headline from the late game. City had to win, they won, they closed the gap, and now Arsenal know that one slip could change everything. And this is what the running does. It exposes nerves, and it rewards momentum, and it punishes teams who can't handle the pressure. So that's today's Premier League review. Liverpool frustrated, Chelsea relieved, Manchester United blunt, Brighton ruthless, Bournemouth dreaming, Wolves damaged, and Manchester City still hunting Arsenal down. But tell me, who had the biggest result of the day? Was it City keeping the title race alive? Was it Brighton strengthening their European push? Was it Bournemouth winning ugly away from home? Or was the biggest story actually Liverpool and the frustration building at Anfield? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more Premier League action, table analysis and proper football stories without the nonsense, subscribe to Fullscope Football, where we see the whole game.